We talk a lot about the differences between formal logic and everyday casual speech. And if you think about it, in just everyday talking, we often leave out things that, other people can just fill in with their minds, right? You just fill in the gaps. And sometimes that actually happens in formal logic as well. And when it does, it creates something kind of neat, something called an enthymeme. And that's what we're actually going to start with in this video. So here is Socrates, and actually this is a little bust that one of my former students gave me. And he's saying, I'm sorry, but enthymeme is a Greek word. It comes from enthymesthai, which means to take to heart, to consider well, to infer, or to conclude. Enthymeme itself means a syllogism that has either an implied premise or an implied conclusion. I really don't understand why dragons and kangaroos have been doing all the teaching in these videos. So we want to make sure we get that definition of an enthymeme. And a little fellow in blue stands up and he says, it stands to reason that no mafia members are good people because everyone knows that no murderers are good people. And a girl in gold says, I get what you're saying, but to put it into a complete syllogism, we should say, no murderers are good people. All mafia members are murderers. Therefore, no mafia members are good people. See, the guy in blue had left out the line that all mafia members are murderers. He just figured that the girl in gold would infer that. He'd spoken in an enthymeme. And Socrates was thinking, I knew they'd understand. Who needs dragons and kangaroos anyway? And here comes Logic Dragon, of course. He says, yeah, well, Mr. Socrates, there are a few more things to say, and I'm the one who has the chalkboard. So again, we've got a few more definitions here. What we call a first-order enthymeme is a syllogism that omits the major premise. If you think about it, that's the first premise in a syllogism, so first-order enthymeme. A second-order enthymeme is a syllogism that omits the minor premise. And again, the minor premise is the second premise of the syllogism, so second-order enthymeme. And a third-order enthymeme is a syllogism that omits the conclusion, where you just assume that your audience can figure it out for themselves. That would be a third-order enthymeme. And Kangaroo comes in here, and she says, enthymemes work because an implied premise is a premise that can be inferred from the other propositions in an argument without being stated directly. Similarly, an implied conclusion is a conclusion that can be inferred from the premises without being stated directly. And again, there are some times when the people can just fill that in kind of in their own minds. Let's see if our logic students really understand. So the guy in green says, I've heard Mr. Perkins is a boring teacher. Is that true? And the fellow in blue says, no way. Everyone knows that all logic classes are fun, and Mr. Perkins teaches some of them. So the fellow in black is trying to figure this out. He says, so what is the guy in blue really saying? And once again, the girl in gold figures it out. She says, he's actually using a third-order enthymeme. And then she breaks it down like this. His major premise is all logic classes are fun. His minor premise is some logic classes are classes Mr. Perkins teaches. So his conclusion is implied. Some fun classes are taught by Mr. Perkins. That's just implied, and it can be inferred. Now, one of the things we've been seeing is that how you arrange words in logic really makes a big difference. And now that you know how to arrange the words in a syllogism, we're going to take that a step further and really explore the importance of word arrangement. So here comes a syllogism. All cyclopes are giants with one eye. Some mythological creatures are cyclopes. Some mythological creatures are giants with one eye. Socrates is thinking, hey, the Cyclopes were not mythological to Odysseus. One of them nearly killed him. Has this guy never read Homer? Now, you might actually want to jot that syllogism down. Right? You may pause the video and just jot that down, because we're going to look at that syllogism but ordered in a different way. Now, we could have written it like this. Some mythological creatures are Cyclopes. Some mythological creatures are giants with one eye. Therefore, all Cyclopes are giants with one eye. And I would go ahead and write that one down as well. We're going to compare and contrast the two different syllogisms and the orders in which the words were written. Now, as it turns out, one of those syllogisms actually works and the other one doesn't. And the difference is entirely based on how the words are arranged. We say that one of the syllogisms is valid and the other is invalid. Valid refers to a properly structured syllogism. That's a term you want to get into your notes. Invalid refers to an improperly structured syllogism. All right, let's take a look at those two again together. All right, so we've got the same words, and you notice that they're simply arranged in a different order. Now, let's go through and actually label what kinds of propositions these are, right? A, E, I, and O. All right, let's go through and label those. And we see that in the first syllogism, the major premise is an A, the minor premise is an I, and the conclusion is an I. And then we just flipped it around the other way. In the second syllogism, major premise is an I, minor premise is an I, conclusion is an A. Okay? And you might want to add those letter labels in your notes. Now, when we label propositions like that, we're referring to something called mood. And this is a very important term for us. Mood refers to the combination and order of categorical propositions in a syllogism. It is represented by the three letters of the propositions. So you could have a syllogism that's an EAE, AOO, IAI, whatever. But labeling the three propositions and putting them in the order of the syllogism, that's called the mood. Now, let's go back to our two syllogisms here. Now notice in the first syllogism, the A proposition, the major premise, we've got Cyclopes, and then in the I minor premise, we've got Cyclopes again. So those are the middle terms, right? Cyclopes will be the middle term in that syllogism. But in the second syllogism, it turns out that mythological creatures, that phrase is the middle term. Right? And that's what's really going to make all the difference here. And again, you might want to go through and circle those middle terms so you can really see them. Now, figure refers to the location of the middle term in the premises of the syllogism. Okay, so just as mood referred to the arrangement of the types of propositions, A, E, I, O, figure refers to where the middle term is. All right, so first figure, the middle term is the subject of the major premise and the predicate of the minor. In second figure, the middle term is the predicate of both the major and the minor. Third figure, the middle term, is the subject of both the major premise and minor premise. And in fourth figure, the middle term is the subject of the major premise and the predicate of the major premise and the subject of the minor premise. Okay, so now if we put that back together, we see that first syllogism is an AII1. You see that it's made up of an A, an I, and an I proposition. And because the middle term is the subject of the major and the predicate of the minor, that's a one figure, figure one. Then in the second syllogism, which is IAA, we see that it's figure three, right? Because the middle term, mythological creatures, is the subject of both the major and the minor premise. And we put all of that together. we get something called schema. Schema refers to the organization of a syllogism by mood and figure. And this is how you can perfectly describe any syllogism. For example, you might have an EAE1, an AOO2, an IAI4, or whatever. When you put mood and figure together, you have completely described a syllogism. And this, I'm going to tell you, is pure gold. All right, this chart, and you're going to want to pause the video for sure to copy this. But of all the different combinations you could have of propositions in a syllogism, there are only 15 that are valid, that actually work, okay? And they are laid out here. AAA1, EAE1, AII1, and so forth. And as you're copying that, I'm going to just talk a little bit more about these words that are off to the side there, right? Barbara, celerant, Darii, Ferio. What on earth is that all about? In the Middle Ages, people used these, basically, these little mnemonic devices to help remember the 15 valid syllogisms. Notice in the word Barbara, you have 3 A's, right? You see the word celerant, you see EAE, right? And that goes with the different moods. Now, I have to be honest, that worked for the folks in the Middle Ages. Doesn't work for me. And I think it doesn't work for a lot of people. It works for some people. If you want to sit and memorize all of those names, you're welcome to. For me, I typically just keep the chart handy and refer to the chart. But again, I want you to know those because those do come up in logic books, and you might see those again sometime. When you've finished copying the chart, you can continue with the video. Now, if we look back at our 2 syllogisms again, we're going to see that AII1 is indeed a valid syllogistic form, but IIA3 is not, right? So that first syllogism is valid, it works. The second one does not. Even though the conclusion is true, it is not a valid syllogism. So I know that was a lot in this video, but hopefully you get a little sense, a little bit more of a sense of just how important word arrangement can actually be when making an argument.